This week on the Inktwell, we're taking a look at the Keras Customs Decograph in sea glass. So 10 seconds in, and you're probably already correcting me going, that's not sea glass, that's unicorn snot, or that's candy cane, or whatever the case may be. No, it's sea glass. Get over it. Now that that commentary's out of the way, let's take a look at the pen. This is a custom acrylic that Keras Customs will do for the Decograph model at pen shows or as one-offs throughout the year. As with the regular black or olive green Decographs, this does come with a milled aluminum clip and milled aluminum end caps, which, as you can see on this one, they do a really good job stamping the Keras Customs logo on the end of the pen. This particular custom acrylic was meant to be a pen show one-off, but they ended up not actually selling them for some reason. I honestly like the pattern, and I think it works really well with the Decograph. By the way, I love that clip. It's just stiff enough that you don't have to worry about the pen flying off. Let's go ahead and take a look at the nib. Now, on the Decograph, Keras Customs uses a number 6 Bach nib. This particular nib is a medium, and it's the stainless steel. They do sell them with titanium and with gold nibs as well. For the most part, this is a standard medium, but as you can see towards the tip of the nib, there is actually a little bit of a downturn. That wasn't done by them, that was done by me. I do that with all of my Bach nibs, I always have, and it's just a weird quirk where I feel that they write better that way. It's just me, your mileage may vary. And to be quite honest, it took a few sacrificial nibs for me to actually get that downturn the way I liked it. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the section. As you can see, the threads are pretty close to the grip section, but they're not obtrusive threads. The way that they turn these pens, the threads are really easy on the hand. Really quick before looking at the rest of the body though, let's go ahead and take a look at the internals. Your Decograph will come with a Schmidt converter, as well as a standard international cartridge as well. Honestly, I prefer the converter. I have eyedroppered this pen a couple of times to great results, but overall, good converter pen. And you may have noticed that it took quite a few turns to get the body off of the section. Look at how many threads there are. That's actually one of the reasons this is a really easy pen to eyedropper. With a little bit of grease, those threads create an amazing seal to keep any ink from leaking out. So now that we got the pen back together, let's go ahead and take a look at the overall capped length of this particular pen. Oh, one last thing of note. As you can see towards the end of the pen, there's a small translucent section in this particular acrylic that actually allows you to see the back end of the converter, or the ink that you have in there if you actually have this eyedroppered. Now, all of my pens were being cleaned, so for length, we're using an A5 Rhodia dot pad, just the standard one that I always use. And as you can see, it comes 2 grid markers away from the edge of the pad. So it's a pretty good sized pen as far as length goes. So let's go ahead and get into the writing sample. As always, we're using my favorite Diatramentus Petrol. I guess you could say I used it for 2 reasons. 1, it actually matches the pen quite well. 2, I just like the consistency and the flow from the ink. And it's Diatramentus. I like saying Diatramentus. Now, right off the bat, you can see the one thing that I really love about this particular number 6 Bach nib. Even before I did the nib modification, this pen just flowed amazingly. Actually, it wrote a little bit more like a broad before I made the modification, which was kind of interesting. But with the downturn, it does write more like a medium. All in all, and yes, I have done a lot of writing with the downturn and without it, it's a very smooth nib right out of the box. Now, with Bach nibs, sometimes you will have to tune them, sometimes you'll have to check them for baby's bottom. It's just one of those things with Bach that a lot of people have come across, even myself. The feed, however, is a really good feed. Honestly, if they could get a more consistent nib with the feed that they have, it'd be perfect. Let me go ahead and sharpen up the camera really quick. That way you can actually see the writing sample a little bit better. Now, another thing that the downturn does give me is a little bit more line variation from the downstrokes to the cross strokes. Once again, going back to that whole personal preference thing. You can always get a stub nib or have it ground. I know Phil Olin has it ground into an Architect on one of his. It's a really interesting nib. Now, as you can see here, post downturn, my particular nib is a little bit drier than normal, but once again, that was personal preference, and I wanted it to be that way. And that really stems from the fact that this pen is a daily carry pen for me, and having a slightly drier nib on random paper helps. So where does that put us on the pros and cons for the Keras Customs / Keras Pen Code Decograph? Let's go ahead and start with the price. This one could be a pro or con depending on your personal tastes. The base model starts at $150, well, $140 to $150, with a steel nib. For an additional $30, you could get a titanium nib, and for an additional $130, you can get a gold nib. I'm okay with these prices because I've seen their operation in Mesa, Arizona. I've seen the care that goes into them actually turning all of these pens. And for me, seeing that work justifies that price. That being said, for some people, that price for an acrylic pen with a steel nib may be a turnoff. It's all up to you. The next thing though, and this is definitely a pro for me, looking at the section, that little flare between the section and the nib itself helps me grip this pen during long writing sessions, and even though it's acrylic and even though my hands may get sweaty, it prevents my fingers from sliding off the end and just causing an all-around bad time. The body itself is actually the third pro for me. The threads going into the section are small enough and spaced just right that they don't cause an uncomfortable grip, they don't get in the way, and for the most part, I honestly don't feel like they're even there half the time. And the length is such that I don't feel like I'm required to post the pen in order to actually write with it. And for me, someone who really doesn't like posting because it can throw off the balance of the pen, I don't have to do that. And this pen is balanced as such that there's no issues there in the first place. And the final pro for me are the milled aluminum accents. It's a good touch, and I really like the fact that Keras Pen Code did these accents in such a way that they add to the overall feel of this Art Deco pen without being gaudy or over the top. Now, let's go ahead and move on to the cons. And for me, there's really only two when it comes to the Decograph. The first one is the Bach nib. Now, most people that have written with Bach nibs that I've talked to have one of two reactions. They either have a great nib right out of the box, or they have a nib with so much baby's bottom that they want to just toss the nib in the trash and get a new nib, or find some way to make a Yovo nib work on a Bach feed. My personal experience with Bach nibs has been a little bit of a mixed bag. I've had about a 50-50 success rate with Bach nibs. When I started doing the little downturn, that turned into about a 90% success rate. But I had to do the downturn because I was really sick of half the time having to work out severe baby's bottom from the nib. Now, with the Keras pens that I've had, the Fountain K and this Decograph, all 4 nibs that I've put in those pens have actually been good. The only real reason that I did the downturn on this one was, like I said earlier, to control the flow, to get it a little bit drier. And the second reason, because it felt more like home. I'd done so much modifying to other Bach nibs in like my Kavekos and other pens that I've grown accustomed to having that downturn on a Bach nib. And even though this one wrote perfectly out of the box, I just wanted to have that downturn so it felt even more right. The second con really has to do with the fact that main production decographs are either aluminum, black, or olive green. I'd like to see Keras put these custom acrylics out more often. I know they can, I know they like doing them, and I know it makes something special for pen shows, but for people like me that can't always get out to a pen show, having these acrylics available more often would be a godsend, and I know they'd fly off the shelves. So where does that put the Decograph for me? Since it's my everyday carry, I think it's quite apparent. This pen is a solid 8 to an 8.5 out of 10 for me each and every time. Now, a little bit of a disclaimer. This particular Decograph was gifted to me about a year ago by Keras Pen Co. after I had done a BYOB Pen Club podcast interview with them about just random stuff and their overall processes and thoughts that go into designing their pens. This particular pen was sitting in the display case, and I'd mentioned a few times, hey, this is really cool, why aren't you guys selling it? We ended up talking about it, their reasons for and against, and I was shocked about a week later when I went down for a pen club meetup when, I think it was Paul, handed me the pen and said, hey, here you go, man. And I was like, mind blown, just complete mind blown. Those guys are really cool, down-to-earth people, and even if they hadn't done that, I was actually planning on walking away with a Decograph, actually paying for it before the pen club meetup was over. I just wasn't expecting that level of generosity from them. And it's that level of generosity and the amount of care that goes into the production of these pens that makes me constantly turn towards Keras when it comes to looking for a pen that I want to have as part of my everyday carry. Now, right now, the Decograph is sold out, but if you'd like to pick up the ink or the Fountain K, head over to penchalet.com and click on the radio podcast link and enter Inktwell in the How You Heard About Us section to get your site-wide 10% off. That's going to wrap up this review, but I'd like to thank you guys for watching these videos. Thank you to Ron and Pen Chalet for being ongoing sponsors of the Inktwell. If you liked the video, click that like button. If you didn't like it, well, you know what to do. Either way though, leave a comment, tell me what you liked or didn't like, and as always, you can support the channel over at patreon.com/theinktwell or follow the channel on Twitter and Instagram at the Inktwell. That's all for this week. I'll see you next time.